p.m. only on Win Media SKN.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to what is a virtual bench meeting, a first of its kind. And um, as want to first of all welcome everyone and thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. I do hope that you are all hearing and you're able to gather what we're being able to say this afternoon. And one of the first things I'd like to encourage every person to do is to be safe out there. The COVID rates for our small island federation are rapidly increasing, concerningly so, in fact, way past concern at this point in time. And we are asking all persons to be as cautious as they possibly can be. We are asking all persons to follow the protocols to the best of their human ability. And additionally, we're also asking all persons to definitely, if at all if inclined to do so, try and get vaccinated so as to afford themselves some level of protection against this ravaging disease. That being said, there's been a lot of football, there's been a lot of sports over the past week, in fact, over the past 2 weeks, because I would have not been with you last week. Due to some of the same complications that we are experiencing in terms of having to make the adjustments on the different time constraints. But there's been a lot of things happening in the sporting world. Basketball, the playoffs are the most exciting that I have seen on record. Definitely a lot going on there to be discussed. The West Indies, the South Africa tour of the West Indies, and deliberately, usually I would start off with West Indies as my first topic, but it's not good reading, it's not good feedback, but it's all part of the learning curve, and I'm still going to try and run through a little 2 minutes of it this afternoon. And then in terms of the major events that are taking place in the sporting world, you also have the Euros as well as the CONMEBOL championships taking place, which is Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, South American, basically, championships. And there's a lot to be discussed around those two competitions, albeit we may not be able to spend as much time doing that because the main course for this afternoon is our discussion with the current vice president and one of the persons vying for the the new presidency of the St. Kitts Nevis Football Association. And Dawn has also been touring with the team, which recently had its highest finish in World Cup qualifiers, the St. Kitts Nevis football team, men's seniors football team. And he also has been, as all persons would know, very, very active in all things football. And there's a lot to fill us in on, as well as let us know what his plans are. So that being said, let us first start off with what has been quite an exciting NBA season so far, with most of the main contenders all being knocked out now at this point in time, because I would like to really see 95% of the pundits and their predictions for this postseason in the NBA and compare them with how things have unfolded, because not many people, if we are all honest amongst ourselves, would have envisioned this type of setup for, first of all, the Western Conference Finals. Now we have Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers going up against Chris Paul and the Phoenix Suns. Now, Suns, rightly so, very good team, all regular season. Chris Paul, definitely one of the top point guards of all time. Were they expected to be in the Western Conference Finals prior to the playoffs starting 2-3 weeks ago? Nobody would say yes, as far as I'm concerned, right? Yet, they're there alongside the LA Clippers, whom everybody thought were never going to make it past the first round, having to face their nemesis from the previous season in the Denver Nuggets. This time, however, they pulled out what was required and they smoked the Nuggets. And then on top of that, just wiped the floor with Utah, a very dominant and very powerful Utah team, within 6 or 7 games. And it's like, these guys are finding ways in which to win. So it brought me to the point, and then over the Eastern Conference Finals, now you just had Giannis and his team, the Milwaukee Bucks, make it to the Western Conference Finals for the first time, Eastern Conference Finals now for the first time in nearly 20 more plus years. And they're probably going to face up, in my estimation, at this point in time against the Atlanta Hawks, because I do not favor the Philadelphia 76ers. I find, and it's based on the one characteristic that I think is affecting all the big teams, the big name teams. For example, the Lakers, whom we expected to do extremely well, the Nets, who did well, but everybody expected them to win everything. All of these teams had big name stars, but they didn't have the stamina coming out of a very, very short off season. Most of them were battling injuries. Most of them were battling tiredness because there was not enough of a downtime for them. So it really came down to the stamina. And the teams that had the most stamina are the teams that are currently now vying for the NBA title. And we're going to have it's so satisfying in the sense that one is unpredictable, so that you can root for the underdog and still have a chance. Previously, coming into most of the post seasons over the last 10, 20 years, you almost knew who's going to, walk away with the title, by exception that, you may have one or two or three teams. At most, you have three teams that you would have picked a champion from. Now, nobody picked the top 4 or 5 as they are right now. Nobody picked them. And for me, that's exciting for the NBA. Definitely a good advertisement for the NBA. But it also, really I'm hoping it's a transition away from the super team thing that was starting with the decision many, many years ago. I really think that it's time now the NBA and needs to level the playing field in terms of how many superstars you want to really assemble, because these guys are assembling teams here now like it's Monopoly pieces on a board, and to me, I think it takes away from the authenticity. But I'm not going to go delve into too much of my opinion on that. I'm still to share some thoughts back and forth with some basketball enthusiasts and panelists like myself over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So kudos to the Suns, kudos to the Clips. Both of them will be playing without their superstars. Chris Paul going through COVID-19 protocols, and Kawhi Leonard suffering an injury in the game 5 of their last round. And then thereafter, he has not been able to show, where I think especially in the case of the Clippers, you had a lot of instances where it was the underdogs who kind of stepped up. Paul George, Pandemic P, as they wanted to call him at one point in time, he's definitely been consistent. And then you had this youngster man who shot the lights out of the Utah Jazz in Game 7. So kudos to those teams, and as well to the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis finally being able to get over the line. On to some West Indies cricket. I'm currently following the scores, and they have the first match, which I was not able to report on, West Indies were blown out of the water. They were beaten by an innings and there were all sorts of different feedback and negative press around it. Some fear, some think a little bit harsh, but needless, without going into too much history about that, currently they certainly have been showing a better game thus far in this current test, we are currently in game 3. We are they bowled out South Africa for 298, which was an accomplishment in of itself, with Kemar Roach finally beginning to show some level of maturity, or I shouldn't say finally. He was showing a great deal of maturity, and it was definitely inspiring to see him and Kyle chase bowl at South Africa. However, West Indies folded quite quickly for 149, with again South Africa, their consistent bowling pegging back the West Indies, and the West Indies losing 20 wickets to errant shots. And unfortunately, well, the one good piece of news is that Shai Hope was able to get into double figures and could have gotten his half century at least. The rest of the batsmen, however, really didn't give anything much to scream about, and they were bowled up for 149. However, in reply now in the second innings, West Indies have South Africa on the ropes on 115 for 7, with Kyle Mayers now leading the charge, and again Kemar Roach coming through with two wickets. And so it seems as if the West Indies really are finding some level of gumption and fight back. And if they can sustain and make good use of this last session of play, and perhaps whittle South Africa out or leave them against the ropes and then come and finish them off in the morning, then it would be seen as an opportunity. Currently, the run rate is the lead by South Africa is 266 runs. I think they need to keep it below 300 for sure if they intend to have any chance at this. And they have a lot of time on their hands, but they need those wickets. They definitely need those wickets. Other than that, there's not much to scream about as far as West Indies cricket is concerned. And unfortunately for us, we are clinging on to bare hope, because even with this current lead, I don't see them being able to. And then, as the last little bit of commentary, we are currently going through the Euros, and as I mentioned, the South American Football Championships. Don, I know you're with me, and you are someone who follows European football, well, all types of football, and even more recently, you've been building a lot of relationships with South American football. I was mentioning to some fellow friends of mine that the European Championships are extremely exciting this year. A little bit, still a little level of predictability, but still unpredictability. But most of the teams have been really, really putting forth some quality performances, and South America equally. There's a lot of entertainment down south. Don? Yeah. Yeah, I was getting your feedback on the South American Championships currently taking place.
Well, I'm following it too, and I'm watching guys like Messi and those guys who are back home trying to do their thing. But I realize that there's no straight winner. We can't predict who's going to win on a given day when it comes to football, especially in the South American continent. The other thing for me, though, as one head coach said, England, they played recently, they drew, and they didn't look like they know what they were doing at all. So, what can we say? Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about that.
Welcome.
You know, football is something else. Somebody said, like, I was watching Portugal scored 4 goals but lost.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That was an entertaining game yesterday.
It was. I see Argentina down south. I see Argentina. They finally won against Uruguay. So yes. It's football on any given day, and that's one of the things I'm looking at, because I think we need to play a lot of football against those South American countries to get over a hump. But we'll discuss that as we go.
Yeah, Argentina, my traditional South American team. And for over the past few years, they really haven't given me anything. It was because of Diego, I would say. Because of Diego Maradona, Argentina was my football team. But I'm not a Messi fan. I appreciate his quality, and I think he is one of the greatest to have graced us. But you can't be a Maradona fan and a Messi fan at the same time, in my opinion. You know, I mean, I think Maradona, he was something more than just. Yeah, I think he was more relatable. I think that's the word I would use. He was more relatable in the sense that we all, because he came from, struggles and this kind of thing, and we all have that dream of one day becoming an international footballer, by practicing, watching, and he was able to live that dream. I think that's why he's a little bit more relatable, more so as a Messi, whom tended to have a bit more of a cultured background, but equally brilliant, and obviously scored a lot more and had a greater impact on club football, especially more so than international football.
I think it's full of thought saying that he is more adept when it comes to the club rather than playing for the country.
Yes. But I think as he has gotten older, he has gotten better for the country. I think initially, he tried to be too much, and country football, internationals, and this kind of thing, they're a lot more conservative. So individualism is not as prominent and as effective a strategy unless you have a team full of individuals like Brazil, which is yes, So it is difficult at international level to really be the main man and still carry teams unless, like I said, you have the genius of a man like a Diego Maradona. And even then, he required a little trickery and a little, one or two other things that he was less famous for to be able to do exactly. So it's more of a fairy tale, and I think that's why people tend to become a little bit more adoring of him as he has passed.
Then again, there were no VAR in those days. Television replay could have done what they did, but they wouldn't call it back. Recently, I saw a game, Uruguay and someone playing, and a penalty was called back after VAR. And if you were looking at the initial play, you wouldn't have even seen the foul. But we told the player kicked over. So, But that's still a discussion that we probably could look at sometime in the future. But have it changed the game? I would say yes.
It has, but has it done so detrimentally? I still think the jury is out on that. We haven't given it much of an opportunity to do so yet. It's just.
We might just say that probably in saying it's in the near future, because one of our local referees, FIFA referee, Mr. Basu, he has some training in VAR. As a matter of fact, the Gold Cup, which is coming off shortly, he will be traveling as a VAR referee. So you never know. When we get the technology in St. Kitts and Nevis, we probably will be able to use it. But we tend to see, our eyes are what we live off of. And when you sit in the park, sometimes you see the referees don't make a call, and you're like, hey, he ain't see that. But, so let's see where we're gonna go. It's just about technology, and some of us feel like it's taken away from the game. If I didn't see it, why do you go back to it? But it's all part of catching the cheats also. So the jury is up.
Yeah, and how I look at it as well. Football has never been stagnant.
That's true.
As a game, it has never been stagnant. That's one of the beauties of the game, because it's always evolved from era to era. It's always evolved, and the teams that are most successful are the ones that are able to evolve as quickly as the game around them. And the coaches that have been most successful have been the coaches that have been able to evolve as the game progresses. Like Mr. Alex Ferguson's. And he's compared to somebody, let's say, like Arsene Wenger, who had an idea, a brilliant idea, it worked, but then when it was time to change the idea, he didn't necessarily have the same level of adaptability, let's say, with Fergie, who he had to beat Arsene, and then when Jose come and hit him a few last, he had to adjust, And then City coming with the big money, now he had to adjust again, you know. So to me,
Football is all about adapting.
yes, yes.
And today we're not playing football in an era where we're not recording or looking at the games. Just like cricket. I'll go back to cricket. West Indies have been studied so much by all the bigger countries because used to beat them so bad that they have now studied us to a point where they could cope and counteract with what we used to do before. Not saying that the players are not as experienced as before, but studying technology will enable countries to pinpoint players who are aware of the mistakes that will make to overtake us.
On top of that, too, I think if we, as a region, cricket, football, other disciplines, employ technology as it comes out a lot faster than we are, we would find ourselves better placed to approach the changes in the sports as they go along. Because I find what happens is that the other teams, they adapt. They realize, okay, West Indies dominating. Let's make some adjustments. We can bring in this. We can try that. We can try this. And they go until they find a recipe and a remedy. Right now is statistics and technology, like you're saying. And these are feeding in now to the thinkers, into the coaches, into the players now, so that now you could channel your game now to defeat your opponent because of this information. I think that as a region, not only cricket, I think overall we have continually trailed behind in the use in our development, in our ability to be able to adapt as quickly as we should, you know. And I can't argue that the resources aren't there to do so. I just think there's a bit of fear of change, as well as a lack of genuine, how should I put it, support for those who would want to be change makers. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, I'll just put it as simple as this. I remember some years ago I filled in for the president at a Gold Cup in California. And one part of the rules were that we now start using 4 changes inclusive. One must be the goalkeeper. And when I came back home as the competition committee chair, I had a discussion with management, and I said, you know, since they're playing it just as cheap as we start using it, that simple as it is, it's a change, and we needed to fit it in, because if we are going to compete in the Gold Cup and others, we couldn't stay with just the 3 changes. Now football have changed again because we are now at 5 or 6 changes, where one is included with the goalkeeper. Now, it's just for us to take them and put them into a system, because it's not just having 5 changes or 6 changes. You have to make sure that you make those changes at specific times, inclusive of 3 stoppages. You have to be careful. So we have started that process. Now, I remember some years ago, the president and Mr. Johnson, we traveled to Mexico, and we visited what you call a Soccer X. Soccer X is more or less a traveling show of the technology that's available for countries when it comes to their football. And one of the things we're looking at, because everybody should know that most of the stadiums, all of the stadiums in St. Kitts and Nevis don't belong to the Football Association. Right. What we were looking at, though, was the technology that could record or tape real-time or games to make production to sell to the rest of the world. ZIZ on all those stations in St. Kitts. Now, we also have to be mindful that we are subsidized by FIFA, our funding administratively, and to make sure that we play football in a holistic way, grassroots up to a national men's and female team. Now, how do we fit that into our processes? Because we'll have to buy those cameras. They don't come cheap. We play production and everything. And we have started in some small fashion, but we have to build it out now, because with the COVID, it's a good thing that we had started before. So now the changes are there. It's just for us to capitalize and put them as projects that people will help us. And I'm sure the next 4 years, you'll see us having to change. a lot
Let,
because
let me ask you this question then, Don. I'm glad to hear that you guys have seen. Why then wasn't it a greater emphasis? Because it's not, yes, COVID has made it almost mandatory that we have that type of, and I'm referring to audiovisual at this point in time specifically. Um, I still find that we waited long because we could have been capitalizing on what we could benefit on, especially from our viewers in terms of pay-per-view services and things that we want to offer now. Now the quality is good, but we all know it could and should be better. What was the kickback?
okay, let's take it this way, and let's start from what I see as the genesis of some of this. We are only television station in St. Kitts, ZSZ. And ZSZ was the station that we used to involve, recording and so forth. But at the same token, we were actually trying to get ZSZ to understand that we were selling them content. It was for them to help us to develop then. A lot of the things that we tend to do, we tend to work with partners, but we realized that we needed to move further. Was it that ZSZ was moving fast as we wanted? I can't say that. No, we started another avenue where we started with Sugar Bowl with his Pep TV, Brian Tape. But the sport was moving faster than their production or what they could handle. Now, it is for us now to invest. So therefore, part of the plan going forward, we'll have to sit down and put a budget in place to build out with FIFA and say, this is what we are headed to. We would like to get this. Now, you ask the question as to why, but everything starts from a seed and it grows. And we now realize that did we not start then, we would not have been where we are today. Now, a young man approached me recently and he sent in his CV because he's into production of games. Now, we have been using Huey, SKN line, and what he's doing have been better than what we had before. So it's just for us to look at what is available, or because Football Association is not about itself. It's about a partnership with the federation. We want everybody to benefit. So if we could find a partner who is willing to produce and give us the best quality in every avenue, then we'll be prepared to work with them. But it must be something that we approve. Plus, additionally, the stadium that we have, the stadium need it have outlived its life, and that's another thing that we need to watch. So, are we going to see the best of St. Kitts when we produce matches at that level? No. So it's something that we have to discuss going forward. It's for government and Football Association with FIFA to sit down in the future and discuss a long-term lease for Warner Park, the football side. Because where I sit and the executive that I'm part of, we would like to break it down to make it match fit for purpose. So there are a lot of things that we have to do to come to this point, but we have started. And once we have started, we can only see the kinks and the additional stuff to make it better.
Okay. And let me offer you an opportunity as well now to also run through a bit of your prospectus. I would like to refer to it as, in terms of some of the ideas that you have in for the Football Association once you are successful in the upcoming election.
Okay, first of all, one of the things that I've always been concerned about as an executive member, I started 12 years ago, not as part of Mr. Johnson's team. I started with Peter Jenkins. He was a past president. And one of the things I've been looking at as, it's been a learning curve for me. And what I would like to build out and make some changes to build on their legacy. First, let me start at grassroots, because it's going to have to be a bottom-up approach to make sure that everything is done properly. Grassroots. We have 24 clubs, 26 clubs, 25 playing clubs, 3 in Nevis, I'm not going to include the referees because the referees will be dealt with on a different side because we also need to develop more or referees or officials. But we have 24.
Sorry to cut you. When you say 26 clubs, you're referring to Premier League or grassroots clubs?
In all, we have 26 members.
Okay, 26 members of the
including the referees. So
Okay.
we have the Leaders Football Association who just joined at least a year and something ago, or a year
Right.
ago. So we have 24 playing clubs.
Right.
They're not all Premier. We have 12 of, Premier clubs. We have 10 First Division. But what I would like to do is start off at the beginning, grassroots. We must involve every club, all 24 clubs must be playing grassroots at some level in their community because all of them come from communities where children are part of the society. That's the only way we could always and maintain the longevity of clubs. Because players don't just get big. They have to start somewhere. All right? In the schools, in the community, we have started a program where we have asked all clubs to adapt their schools. Therefore, if you have schools plus all those children from the various schools in your area, grassroots have to be played in those communities on Saturdays, every Saturday, because we need to hone the skills of children. And what I'm looking for is for equity. All communities that host clubs must be the beneficiary of football at that level, both male and female. 2, youth football. I can remember some years ago, we had a league sponsored by National Bank in collaboration with the Football Association. We had so many youth clubs playing, youth leagues playing, or teams playing in the youth league. We have to make sure that we capture every community that hosts, again, a club. Because as we are now, I am not satisfied that 10 or 12 teams playing in a league is beneficial to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I am not satisfied with that. I am of the opinion that we are leaving out children who should be playing football or gainfully employed in playing the game, both male and female. As a matter of fact, just 2 nights or 3 nights ago, a young lady practically interviewed me on Facebook, where she was like, Mr. Grant, I heard that you're running for the Football Association president. I want to know what you plan to do with the females. And I had to sit down and say, this is a thinking lady. No, female football for the past few years have been more or less a development players at different levels. You have some very, very good players. As a matter of fact, I can remember sitting down in the stadium once with some of the ladies and they were like, Mr. Grant, we need to start our own female league for females. But I had to look back at it and say, we need to make sure it's marketable first. We started playing some games in the park recently and people come in and watch the games. But are we playing enough female games? Are there enough female teams? I don't think so. Now, one of the things we have had over the past few years, players gravitate or migrate to Newtown to play Newtown because Newtown have been one of the best teams in female. Village, I remember some years ago when Mr. Morris, Coach Morris, went to Connery, he had a team that challenged the upper card, which was Newtown. They won. I also remember when Keon started under the presidency of Cassidy Williams, where they started with some under 13 girls and built until they were able to win the female under 7x7 league. No, what I see there, some clubs have been able to capitalize on young ladies to play the game, but do we have enough teams playing to make the product as good as it should be? No. One of the things I would like to do going forward, St. Kitts and Nevis have numerous young ladies who like to play football. Some stay away from clubs because they don't want to be a part of it. So, going forward, what I would like to do, the clubs will still get to play against each other. But I would like to do a draft system where we'll invite girls of all age, even if it's on the fires, you do the grassroots with them. But to get at least 10 to 12, 14 teams where girls are put in a draft system. Hey, and that way I'll be able to mix. We'll be able to mix the very good players with the beginners. so that we could level the playing field and make the football more approachable by players. Because I know parents, mothers, who want their children to play football, girls, but they don't want them in the club society, the club setting. The Football Association will then have to control that because we'd like to at least make sure that all of our girls are given a clear way or a fair chance to play the game of football. And that's just at the bottom. I'm building my way up.
I see that.
Right? I came from a community, Saddlers, where they used to call us the Saddlers First Division Bullies, where every year we will win once we're in First Division, transition to Premier or First Division then, and we couldn't stay. We just kept doing it, kept doing it, kept doing it. Now, I've looked at the First Division. I've traveled the island. I try not to miss the games when I have a chance. I try to make sure I go to all the games I could on Saturdays, whichever day the First Divisions are played. I've always been challenging clubs, Molineux, Newton Gold, Lodge. We need to make ourselves better. Some clubs will tell me, as soon as we reach into the Premier League, we're going to fix our systems. No. Therefore, what I'm offering to the clubs is a fair, equal, equitable pathway where First Division, just like any other club, St. Kitts and Nevis is one of 211 members of FIFA. We're given $1 million, just like England, who have football with 1,300 clubs. So, just like we get funds for development, I'm offering all the clubs, First Division included, the equal amount of monies to use, just like the Premier level clubs, for their development. Because most of the times, the First Division clubs have very good players. And what they do, what happened to them? They are poached by Premier League clubs to play for them. If you want to be seen for the national level, you have to play for a Premier Division club. That's not true. The Football Association have no such policy where First Division clubs, players have to be playing for a Premier League club to be seen. What we need is a selection committee that will follow the games around the island. Not just come to the park, but to watch the First Division in action. That will be, because I'm going to tell you this, there's some very good players in the First Division, but we need to hold them again and make sure that we help them. And that's the reason why I said grassroots, youth football, even female, must be fixed. Because if you don't fix those, the First Division clubs and Premier League clubs are going to be left cannibalizing each other because they don't have the players in their community. So First Division, I want to make sure they have a level playing field. Right now, since the COVID, it made it even better for the First Division clubs because a lot of them used to say to me, we want to play in our community because we want our people to see us. But if we move them just like COVID had forced us into specific areas to play, it makes them even better because, one, they're playing in almost a similar setting as the Premier League. Their scene will start taping or videotaping or streaming one or the main matches at specific venues. Two, the lighting problem that we have had over the years at most of our grounds is something that is having a handicap to most of the clubs. But I can tell you, because the government have a proposal or plan that should have been started already to change all of the lights on all of the outfields to LED. And I'm waiting for that day because that will give players a chance to be able to have better lighting at their fields. And that's not only for First Division, it's also for Premier League clubs because all of them have the same handicap. And that is what I'm trying to change. First Division, championship money will be increased to $20,000 for starters. Two, there have been problems with the promotion, the way the promotion clubs are dealt with. Some clubs have been, and I must say, over the years, this have been something that the clubs have voted for. The school of thought by some persons and some pundits and some of the clubs are that the team that wins number one at the end of the regular season should be promoted directly, straight up.
Mhm.
That I'm in favor of. Some persons would like to see others, but I think that in sitting down with the clubs, we could approve this because it's been something that have been handicapping some of the clubs over the years. I can remember Derby when they topped the league, 50 something points. And they were like,
They
we're
had to
going
pay the
straight to
run.
Premier League.
Yeah,
You know,
had to
and
pay- yeah.
it really broke the guy's heart. Now, that being said, we're always going to be promoting two clubs. How do we get the second club? School of thought, second, third, fourth, and fifth, go into a playoff, and the winner goes up. I think it's something similar the Champion League does in England to get the clubs into Premier. So we're going to try that. We're going to make sure that we give back to all the clubs. I know First Division, they don't make any money. They have to travel to Nevis. They have to travel the island. We, the Football Association, must remember that football at the national level is what we are trying to achieve. So therefore, when we must control and make sure every club, First Division, Premier League, more so especially the clubs in our sister Nevis, we have three clubs, two playing, hard times and bats. They do a lot of traveling between the islands. We have to cover the cost of their travel. When I lived in the BVI have numerous little islands. A lot of football have been played in Tortola and Virgin Gorda. The Football Association, they had to cover the costs. So the Football Association will subsidize the costs because we don't want it to be a free-for-all. It must be a measured, controlled approach. That way, I won't have a club calling me this afternoon on Saturday afternoon about that. We can't make it here. Players, they ain't got the money. No. We can't chance that. We can't chance failure of a young man to play his football. That we'll have to make sure we subsidize the clubs to travel for their message, especially between the two islands. There are a lot of things that we have to do also with the First Division because most of the time, running a club, volunteer it is, it comes with a lot of work. So you must do some support when it comes to the executives. And one of the things I remember sitting down in 2010 at the Congress, I looked back and I said, you know what? Instead of me being here, I would like to offer the presidents of clubs a chance to travel and see how FIFA and CONCACAF operates. Why? They don't get paid. But a trip to see, because the Football Association should be about building capacity. At the end of the day, when Mr. Johnson is gone, Don Grant is gone, club leaders should not have to walk around and say, boy, you know, I work for all these years, and there's nothing that I've had. There's no benefit. They should be able to look back and say, you know, I had a chance to travel the world. Not for fun, but to see how football is done internationally. And that is one of the things I want to offer to the clubs so that we can get the executive to understand it's not just all work, but there'll be some free time or leisure or something that we'll give back. It will be done like a lot of system that this president, when he travels sometime to a meeting for people, the next one, it's so you don't have one president traveling 3-4 times. You understand? I'm just offering back to them because football in St. Kitts and Nevis have changed. There's a lot of work. People don't get paid, but they sacrifice vehicles, house, limbs. So we have to give back to them in some form or fashion. Before I go off of the First Division, this is something that I've been seeing over the years. Myself, the president, the general secretary, and other executive members have been doing this. And one of the things I want to give back to all the youths, each club, 24, 26 clubs, must work with schools. The schools have children going into high schools from grade 6. There's always a top boy, a top girl. The Football Association, through its members, must start a scholarship fund where $500 is given to that boy and that girl going into high school. You know what that does? It offers those children in the communities that picture of what the club should be doing for their benefit. You know, Saddlers Club or Dateby Club, they are helping me in terms of the cost. still at the cost. We know how things are. So one of the things I want to start, which we have not started as I wanted it before, but I want to build on it. We have already started for the clubs to adapt the schools, but those two children, top boy and girl, going into any high school of the community that hosts that club, must see where football could help them.
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
scholarships
I want to
for our children going into school.
I want to ask you a few questions based on some of the things that we've discussed here. So, but watching the time to say we have a little bit of a time constraint. So what I want to ask is, because what I want to do is you're going to have persons who, from the general public and otherwise, who have one or two questions that would be of interest for you to be able to answer, as well as questions based on some of the things that you said. So what I'm going to do is try within a 10-second ask question, get a 30-second to minute response from you, move on to the next one, right?
No, no problem.
Just a different type of format, so as to get through the questions and ensure that we cover all the necessary information. Plus, I want to touch the senior team as well too for a little bit before you go. Okay, we started at the grassroots level, and you said that you want all clubs to have a grassroots team. Now, not from my observation over the past, I guess, decade or more that I've been here now, not all clubs have the capacity to have a grassroots team for a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's players, sometimes the administration of a grassroots as well as a senior team is a bit cumbersome, not as much voluntary support. And then also, for me, one of the biggest drawbacks to football development is the lack of trained coaches to be able to lead these teams from grassroots, female, all the way through to senior teams. We're always very dependent on an overseas coach to help us make that next step. What is in mind what do you have in mind in terms for the development of coaches in particular to be able to help you, assist you with your plans?
Okay. So far, the Football Association started this SKNFA CONCACAF licensing program. That will be built on. But what we need also, that we need to make sure that the coaches that come into the system are tried. That means that, for instance, we started at the D. We must be able to put those coaches in what you call a probationary period for at least a year or year and a half to watch them grow. Instead of just...
For example, I'm a guy I've done the D, I've done the SKNFA D, and sorry for cutting, just to ensure we get the thing. SKNFA D, CONCACAF D, grassroots, SKNFA C.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I used to do a little weekly coaching with Goals Academy, lesser so these past few months, but still a part and parcel of that, as well as you also know that I'm involved with the Caribbean Tours team. So I offer my coaching assistance there. One of my drawbacks was we never had that consistency in terms of a team to be able to see how we coach. In other words, if I'm going to be coaching, set me up with a team. Don't just give me a mentor. Give me a team to work with. High schools need teams. Primary schools need coaches. What is the program after I come and get this paper? Because I've not gotten any of my licenses in terms of physical documents. I can only say that I've done these things, but I can't carry it nowhere with me. Where's the practical application of what we've been learning over the past 3-4 years? Because I must admit, you have had good coaching sessions, programs.
That is true. Let's say this. That is something that I've been challenged with over the years too, with Boston saying they've come to various coaching courses and not received their certificates. That's something I've discussed with our president and the executive, and something that we can fix. But we have trained hundreds of coaches over the past year. one of the things that we realize is coaches normally get into the system or program from their clubs. Clubs such as persons to start. What have faded in the past years, persons become coaches and they move around to the different clubs. But while we don't want to hold the fire and say, hey, you have to go to this, we have to put the coaches in a probational period where we could observe them. We have technical persons in St. Kitts and Nevis that could see where the coaches are to when they have made our transition to specific levels. From A right down to B, where we are now. So we need a probational period where we have coaches working with specific clubs, not really at the national level as yet, because you have to work within the local parameters first before you transition up. Mm-hmm. And we have to make sure that is happening. What should have been affixed to our coaching program was that probation period where we could look at you, the technical persons come in your area, look at where you are, to make sure that you're doing what they were taught. Because, as I said, the federal football is based on what we do on the local ground. Now, if we have players in the national program that becomes national players, we have to follow our coaches the same way. Yeah. And that for me have not been done. No. That we have to do that, because how do we gauge where our coaches are as compared to the coaches that we'll have to bring in when we have national teams to help them? We have to, one, train more coaches, identify the coaches and help them to work with their clubs, because building the clubs is also part of the program that we could gauge their development.
What about creating opportunities for them to go overseas and train for it?
That being said, it comes from being in the program where, because we are a member of FIFA or we have our CONCACAF, we reach out to our sister MAs, so we could ask for coaches to replace on probational programs also, maybe for 3 months, maybe for 2 months. We have to, because we have always been able to capture coaches from the US Soccer Federation to come in and assist. But we must be able now to get our coaches, just like our players, outside, not really to work, but to gain some experience from better organized clubs than we have. And that is where we are, because we need to capture the moment. Over the past few years, every single national team that we have brought in an overseas coach for, the intention was always, and if you can see, we have always put assistant coaches with the intention that they will learn to take over.
But I think you need more. I think you need more than that, Godon. I think you need almost a coach to come down here for a period of time to train coaches. Because yes, we've been trained over the last few years, but it's been very specific training by a specific qualified group, and to expand our horizons a little bit, because even within the qualified group of persons that train, they were allowed the opportunity to go overseas and train under different circumstances.
That is different,
and that's why they can now come back here now and try to impart. So
exactly, I stick up in there, because I remember when we brought in Passy some years ago. Passy came here and did a stint pro bono, worked with us to our team were able to reach 73 in the world. One of the things and the expense that we had was that we needed a coach like Passy. He should have been on the ground for at least 6 months. 6 months, not only to work with our players, because his fresh eye would have seen coaches, but to work with our coaches. And that's something that we need to offer. Now, we have started a process where we have had Leo, the present coach of the national team. He's on the ground. And one of the things, because he's here working with the national team, I know he have had a lot of conversation with a lot of the coaches. Now, what we have to do is to make that process even more helpful for our national coaches on the ground, where his experience, his learning, additional to other coaches that we'll invite to St. Kitts to go to the programs with them, and just to give them the experience, the level of approach that they have to do when it comes to transition into running the national team as a professional coach. Because a lot of what we've said in St. Kitts, I've heard persons saying, oh, we need to change the Premier League to a professional league. What we need to do, professional doesn't necessarily mean payment.
Exactly.
Professional means changing the attitude to the game to transition to that payment stage.
Mhm.
And that's what we need. So I hear you, but what we need to do is marry those coaches that we've been able to bring to the federation from the national, international claim to work with our local coaches, not
I agree.
only male but female coaches.
Email as well, yeah.
So,
So like, for
Go
example, just as an example, maybe Coach Leo could put together a program. It need not be a licensing program, but a coaching program,
enrichment program,
an enrichment program, for example, which could lead toward you acquiring a license later on. But just to be able to impart some of what he is trying to achieve through the technical perspective to a vast majority of coaches. Maybe you make that one available for only Premier League coaches or Premier League and First Division, trying to cap it so it's not too many. And then it allows him to kind of follow up later on his next visit. He can sit and have a conversation now, based on what we discussed the last time, based on what you went through, and what have you been doing? What have you been seeing in terms of XYZ player who've been playing at your club? You know what I mean? Have there been any challenges? That type of conversation I think we need to be having.
That is true. I want to say this too, because over the years, I remember when we would have brought national team coaches to the island. It always perplexed me as to why some of our local coaches who have players in the national team were told they couldn't sit in the park to watch the national team train. That for me was a no-no.
You know.
Why? If an international coach is here with our national team, the best thing to do is to offer all your coaches who have players in the system to watch. You know why? That player coming to the national system might have changed where he play in your team, in your community, because the national team see, hey, he's more adapt for this.
Yes.
Then the local coaches seeing that, they say, you know, I never thought of that, you know. And watching the national team with foreign coaches could also give the coaches the start to say, you know, I never think of trying out players like this. Look at him approaching the players.
Yes.
I have to change my stance. You know, and that's for me. We need to marry these visits of international coaches or national coaches, whether it be female, male, grassroots. We need to make sure that we help. The Football Association is about capacity building. I'm gonna just go spend 1 minute to tell you this. There's a young man who did some coaching courses here in St. Kitts and Nevis who I admire a lot. His name is Jenkins, Asim Jenkins. I remember when the technical staff suggested that he become one of the national team coaches in some form or fashion. You know what he did? He looked at himself and he said, you know what? I'm just starting out in coaching. I don't think I have the experience yet to take on a national team. Let me work with a local club in its setting to build my experience rather than reaching to the national team and failing. I think coaches need to approach the game like that, because I've seen a lot of our coaches put with the national team, and as soon as they fail by losing, they put on the back burner, and that for me is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to stop that. That can't happen.
Here's what I'm gonna do, Don. This is part 1. I'm gonna book you for part 2 next week, same time, hopefully same forum, and because I've got, based on just what you've discussed so far, I've got at least another 30 minutes of discussion in questions alone, right? And we still have not attacked the national team setup, and we still haven't attacked some of the pushback comments that I've been getting that I think you would want the opportunity to address. So thanks for being here, and I look forward to, as long as you could book me on your calendar, and I would look forward to meeting you again next week around the same time. And I want to also thank the listeners. I'm sorry because the conversation for me was just getting really, really interesting. And to me, there's a lot more content that was going to come out. So I didn't want to try and rush that content and then not necessarily let the listeners grasp what we are going to be discussing for the next segment. So definitely next week Sunday,
you and I will be having a further sit down. And at this point, I'd like to tell all of my listeners, thank you. This is a new format. It's actually not as intimidating as I thought it would have been. I kind of enjoying the little Zoom. I could be at peace in my own space while having these type conversations, which is interestingly how most of us tend to want to talk about our sports. So thank you, listeners. Again, be safe, follow your protocols, get vaccinated, those who are interested. Thank you very, very much, Don. This was an intriguing conversation, and it will get more so next week. Because I know you have a long history in football, and there's a lot you have to offer still. So it'll be good to rejoin with you. And we're going to be signing out here from the bench meeting.
Just a minute, thanks to the listening public also.
No problem. Yeah, and thanks once again to one and all. And we're going to be signing out here from the bench meeting. Kenneth Baum, your number one panelist. And here we go.
Have a good one, man. Thanks.
For real and unbiased sports news and reviews, from cricket to football and everything in between, with in-depth interviews from your favorite sports icons, check out The Bench Meeting, hosted by Kenneth Bob on Sundays from 4 to 5 p.m. only on Win